It's funny how a single cheap garage remote can feel like a weapon in your hand. That Sunday morning, I hit the button, and the door to my two-car sanctuary, my fortress of solitude, started its slow, grinding climb. I only meant to grab a box of Christmas lights. But the door slid up just enough, maybe waist high, and that was it. The perfect cinematic cue for chaos. Across the cul-de-sac, striding with the self-important pace of a retired drill sergeant, was Brenda Carmichael. The HOA president, our local monarch, and the chief architect of what I now call the Great Lexus Heist. She stopped dead in her tracks, like a cartoon character hitting an invisible wall, her eyes locked on the gleaming metallic blue sedan inside my garage, and then she went nuclear. She didn't just yell, she shrieked into her phone, dialing 911 faster than a teenager trying to win concert tickets. "That's my vehicle. He seized community property. I bought that car at a legally binding auction last week. I need the police here now." Neighbors started pouring onto their porches, coffee mugs frozen halfway to their lips. The HOA board members, her little inner circle, I swear they materialized out of thin air, started circling me like vultures waiting for roadkill. It felt completely surreal, like a bad B-movie, until I locked eyes with Brenda. Her face wasn't confused, it wasn't angry, it was satisfied. She had set the trap, and now she was watching me step into it. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a setup. See, my car, my trusty Acura TLX, had disappeared from my own driveway 2 weeks earlier. No broken glass, no skid marks, just an ominous oil spot and a knot in my stomach. This happened right after a barrage of increasingly bizarre and aggressive HOA notices, fines for an unapproved color scheme on my recycling bin, and the notorious $150 penalty for non-compliant vehicle decal under their new mandatory Beacon Park residential parking program. I knew the decals were nonsense. I owned my spot. I knew the fines were a shakedown. But I figured, fine, I'll play the game. I got the decal, I paid the initial fines under protest, and I documented everything. Photos, dates, copies of every threatening letter, and my original title and fresh registration stashed safely in a binder. I just wanted peace. A quiet evening on the patio, not this suburban warfare. But then the car vanished. I eventually tracked it down to a grimy private tow yard on the edge of town. The clerk, an emotionless guy chewing on a toothpick, slid me a release form and charged me a ridiculous storage and maintenance fee, like it was just another Tuesday. I drove home furious but relieved. I thought the worst was over. I was so wrong. That same week, flyers started appearing, taped to the clubhouse notice board, slipped under everyone's doors. Abandoned asset line sale, vehicle auction. The photo was suspiciously cropped, but the subtle scratch I knew so well, right above the passenger side taillight, it was my Acura. Brenda was blasting the notice through the neighborhood newsletter like a declaration of war. She wasn't just finding me. She was trying to steal my equity. That's when I pivoted from compliance to counterattack. I didn't want a confrontation. I wanted a record. I filed a formal complaint with the city attorney's office, copied the state DMV compliance department, detailing the bogus fines and the questionable tow. I moved the car into my garage, safe and sound, and angled my dash cam and a new home security camera directly at the street. I was ready to let paperwork meet proof. 2 days later, the notice of HOA asset recovery slipped under my door. The language was pure melodrama. Failure to cooperate. Community interest over individual will. Abandoned title resolution. It was a fabricated narrative, a legal fiction they were creating to cover their tracks. But I knew their story had a fatal flaw. It was missing the vehicle identification number, and that brings us back to that Sunday morning. Brenda screaming into her phone, the neighbors whispering, the sun glinting off the metallic blue paint of my Acura inside my garage. I just stood on the curb, the cool, laminated folder heavy in my hand, and waited. The patrol car rolled up fast, but quiet. 2 officers, calm, professional, cutting through the emotional smog Brenda had created. Brenda, of course, went first. Loud, certain, and completely rehearsed. She thrust her bill of sale at the primary officer, pointing at my garage like she expected a SWAT team to breach the door. "Officer, he's a thief! This vehicle was legally sold to me by the association to recoup unpaid community fees." The officer glanced at me. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply handed him the folder. "Officer," I said, "I have the title, the current registration, the certified tow release from the yard, and these time-stamped stills from my security camera showing a private tow truck taking my car from my driveway at 2:11 a.m. There was no police request and no municipal order. Everything is here." He didn't need to say much. He just flipped through the documents, his eyes focusing on the numbers. He looked at Brenda's bill of sale, then back at me. He had a quiet authority that stripped the drama right out of the air. "Sir, ma'am," he stated flatly, "we need to verify the VIN." We opened the garage all the way. Brenda took a triumphant step forward, only to be stopped by the officer's outstretched hand. He leaned in, peering through the windshield, reading the small metal plate fixed to the dashboard. He read the sequence aloud, compared it to my title, "Match." He cross-checked it with my registration, "Match." Then, he took Brenda's glossy bill of sale and compared it to the plate again. The silence was deafening. Every neighbor was leaning in, waiting for the verdict. The officer looked up, first at Brenda, then back at the plate, just to be sure. "Ma'am," he said, his voice dropping to a neutral, official tone, "the vehicle in your bill of sale, it's the same make and model, same year, but the VIN is not even close. It's a completely different sequence of numbers." Brenda's volcanic confidence shrunk instantly, her face turning a sickly shade of gray. But the auction was valid. "Community rules allow abandoned title recovery," she stammered, frantically pointing at her paper. The officer simply raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, community rules are not state law." Meanwhile, the second officer had called the tow yard, using the report number from my release form. The call ended. He looked at the primary officer. "The yard confirms a lien sale date was posted, but the DMV notification was never filed. The unit they listed for sale is still technically on hold, and no transfer was ever processed. Brenda's purchase, her whole grand scheme, was a fantasy built on a flyer, a fake bill of sale, and the certainty that her paperwork would intimidate me into submission. But numbers don't fold under pressure." The officer documented the massive mismatch, photographed my receipts, and, most importantly, logged a potential false report against Brenda. He looked at me, gave a small, quiet nod, the kind of nod that says facts held up, and advised me to keep the car secured while the city and the DMV dealt with the tow yard and the board. Brenda stood there, clutching her fraudulent bill of sale, suddenly smaller, less certain, stripped of all her self-importance. The officer told her to step back, that the matter was out of her hands. As the garage door came down, shutting out the drama, the truth of the situation was sealed. The story she tried to create didn't matter. The record did. The ripple effect didn't explode. It spread quietly, relentlessly. The city launched a full inquiry into the tow company's lien practices. The HOA's auction flyer vanished overnight, replaced by a pathetic, bland notice about parking policy under review. Karen stopped patrolling the streets with her clipboard. Neighbors started sending me screenshots of their own bogus warnings and fines, admitting they'd paid hundreds just to avoid the harassment. A month later, the tow yard, on the advice of their attorney, quietly reimbursed my tow and storage fees as a courtesy. The HOA canceled the entire parking program and walked back a stack of fines that had grown out of a policy no one could actually cite in law. 2 board members resigned. Brenda lost her seat in the subsequent special election. The next neighborhood newsletter looked truly allergic to the word must. My Acura stayed where it belonged, behind a door that opened and closed on my schedule. My folder stayed thick, dates, numbers, copies, and a simple truth was reaffirmed. So, here's my question for you, because this is the part that truly matters. A clipboard is loud, but a code book is louder. If someone tries to rewrite reality on your driveway, would you just argue louder? Or would you calmly gather the proof, open the door, and let the numbers speak for themselves? Let me know in the comments below. Have you ever faced an HOA tyrant, a Brenda Carmichael, who tried to take your property? What was your counterattack? Share your war stories. Let's see how many of us have been hit by these systemic pressure campaigns. Hit that like button if you think facts always beat drama, and subscribe if you want to hear more stories where the little guy uses paper and proof to win. Thanks for watching.